RevOps AF, the only podcast for people who are RevOps AF and want to learn all about things that are RevOps AF.
I'm one of your co-hosts, Camela Thompson, and today I'm joined by Rhys Williams. Rhys, tell us a little bit about yourself.
It's great to be here. Excited for the conversation today. I run a revenue operations consulting company called Domestique. I've been in the ops space for, 15-ish years. I think, like a lot of ops professionals, I had a somewhat circuitous way of getting in. It was a financial crisis in 2010. Just needed a job, somehow landed a sales ops job with a tech company, not because I wanted it, but because I had grad school loans that I deeply needed to pay back. Started Domestique about 3 years ago. Now got a team of 30 working with us, and we're very excited to be helping to partner with a lot of great companies out there and trying to kind of like level up their revenue operation.
Awesome. And I first heard you speak at some cash flow webinars. You were at RevOps AF 2024, and a bird may have told me that you're thinking about speaking at 2025. Is that true? Not true? What do you think?
That is true. So I don't know if I don't know if I'm allowed to say this or not, but I've never been to I haven't been to New Orleans since I've been over the age of 21. So I don't know if New Orleans is spoiling things or not, but like if it is, just delete that out. Anyways,
you're fine.
It also lines up conveniently with Jazz Fest, which I've never been to. So like there's a lot of things I'm excited about speaking, but yes, it was a blast. Was great about the RevOps AF this year was like it was cool being at a conference where there's so many thoughtful professionals and people genuinely wanted to learn. You don't see that at a lot of conferences you go to.
No, and thank you. We tried really hard to make it as product agnostic as possible while still teaching skills that are relevant. That's hard to do without the technology sometimes, but there are so many skills we need.
It's very hard to do. And what you did with the experiences were awesome. The taco tasting, I can personally attest to, was fantastic. So
we will have experiences again. I am excited. And yeah, I'm begging Matt for a ghost tour as well, because you can't go to New Orleans and not do ghost tour. No. Anyhow, that's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about some topics that are very near and dear to both of us. And I would like to start with Rhys. What do you think RevOps should look like as a department?
Okay. So before we get into what it should look like, I think it's important to take a step back to be like, what is RevOps? What's interesting is like, whenever we talk, do a webinar, have a prospecting meeting with clients, like 90% of the time we start here because I vastly think most individuals, whether it's a company hiring for RevOps, whether it's a RevOps agency, and even some RevOps professionals actually don't understand what true RevOps is. And I'm not saying that negatively and things like that, but I think that RevOps is this amorphous thing of like, oh, it's just this or it's all of this, and people just categorize anything and everything into it. So I think being very clear about what it is and is not is important. So when we at Domestique think about revenue operations, we think about across the entire customer journey, not just sales and marketing. And so when I talk about that, I truly mean product, marketing, BDR, sales, PS, CS, support, all in alignment with finance. The second is we think there's 5 work streams across that customer journey, and the order is very important. So first is strategy or your go-to-market strategy. Everything from who's your ICP? Do you have a revenue methodology like a Spice, MedPick, Bant? Are you an account-based marketing firm? All those types of things. Your go-to-market strategy has to be documented or it doesn't exist. Second is process. The process comes out of your go-to-market strategy. So there's everything from how does a BDR take a first phone call? What are the questions they're asking? Are they based in MedPick? How do they put them in the CRM? But again, documented processes that allows whether it's one individual or 20 individual, everybody's running the same playbook. Third is tooling. This is not just your CRM, but the entire tech stack that touches the customer journey. And it should be set up based on a strategy and process. Fourth is data. Data comes out of your tech stack. 3 things about data. Only measure what you can make a decision around. Data's got to fly at the right altitude. And data has to be presented in such a way where the end consumer of the data, a CRO, a sales rep, a BDR, CSM, actually understands what it means without RevOps having to explain it to them and can then go make a decision around it. Last work stream is enablement. Data highlights your hotspots across your customer journey, and then you point enablement at it. We think of enablement in 3 buckets: skills, how do you have an executive conversation, how do you multi-thread, tools, how do you use the tech stack, and 3 is competition. How do you position yourself within an industry, battle cards, objection handling, so on and so forth. So that's what we think RevOps is. And I think once you have a clear understanding of what it is, then you can talk about kind of like, all right, how would you structure RevOps in a perfect world? Because without understanding what it is, I don't think you can get into kind of the structure whatsoever. So when we think about revenue operations, there's this kind of like perfect world, and then there's kind of like what is reality, like the Frankenmonster, right? So the perfect world is like, all right, company starting brand new, they've got all the resources in the world, they want to set up the best in class revenue operations department. What does it look like? Well, first and foremost, and I know we're going to talk about this a little bit later, and I won't spoil, I'll leave it as a cliffhanger of like where RevOps reports to is very important. We have a very specific opinion about that, but as you kind of think about what are all the different things that should fall under RevOps, we think about them typically in kind of 5 buckets. First is what we call like field operations. Field operations, this would be like your marketing ops individuals, your sales ops individuals, your CS ops individuals, all the different kind of department ops who are in with the individual departments, but because they're rolling in under RevOps, that's how you get that alignment. Second bucket is what we call tooling, right? This is your business systems. We intentionally call it your business systems, but this is where your key admins sit, your CRM admins, so on and so forth. Third is enablement. So this is your revenue enablement, not just sales enablement. Fourth is what we call strategy and insights, and we break this up. So insights is really your historical looking, backwards looking reporting. How do we have single source of truth? When we're talking about like MQLs month over month, we all pull them from the same report, all that type of stuff, clearly documented, historical looking insights. Strategy is the more forward looking, proactive, looking around corners. This is like when you're doing capacity planning, territories, all that type of stuff that needs the kind of some more forward looking thoughts. Oftentimes it can be the same individual, but like it's definitely 2 different sets of skill sets, and that's why we break it out. The last bucket is kind of, again, we're talking about perfect world here, but deal desk. You want your deal desk individuals as a part of this. So again, and we think about deal desk as a strategic partner with the sales and CS team, not just individuals who sit there and say, no, you can't do that, or this doesn't meet the discount justification.
There's so many thoughts popping into my head, but the first thing I guess I want to attack is there are some things really standing in the way of doing this well. And I think one of the things really standing in the way is an open, honest dialogue about what the systems are intended to do for the business and why they're there. So hear me out. For example, the CRM was not built to help salespeople do their job. It just wasn't. It was built to collect information so we don't lose things when the salesperson walks out. And it's also to help us gather key KPIs to help us make decisions about the business and how we should staff things like CS, et cetera. I think too many people don't realize that a big part of what revenue operations should be doing is thinking through, how can I make this as useful as possible while still collecting the key metrics? And how do the other systems on either side of this? You're right. It's not just about the CRM, but there's 2 hurdles here I kind of want to talk through with you. One is there's this big gap between what the tools are really honestly intended to do and what we're trying to sell them as and what we're led to believe they are. And then there's also a huge gap in skill sets because we're not spending any time in the other systems. We're just myopically focused on specializing. There's reason for that, right? Like each tool is highly complex. It's hard to understand. How do we get past CRM administrators, they only have time to do that because that job's so big. How do we get past let me see if I can frame this a little bit better.
I know what you're saying. Like I 100% know what you're saying.
Yeah.
Like and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it sounds like there is an issue in revenue operations, and this is, I think, part of the reason why I started with like, what is revenue operations? Where a lot of companies, professionals, RevOps agencies think RevOps is being a CRM admin.
Yes.
And part of that is to the point you just made of like the job is so big. And the reason, again, going back to why I'm so specific about the framework and always starting everything with what is revenue operating. The challenging part is most CRM admins tend to be reactive and just build for buildings without understanding kind of that strategy part, right? And this is, again, why like your CRM and really your tech stack, like everybody defaults to the CRM, and it should be about the tech stack, should be set up. And all it is a technical representation of your strategy and your process, and should fundamentally, at the end of the day, help your team drive more efficiency. When I talk about efficiency, I specifically mean greater, we talk about the sales velocity equation, right? Number of ops times ASPs times conversion rate divided by a sales cycle, right? Which is more throughput. It should drive more throughput through the funnel via efficiency. Like this should be a net add, but one of the challenges that you see here is everybody's just like, oh, we've got 500 things that have been requested, and I'm just trying to knock out to-do lists, instead of essentially saying, no, let me take a step back and actually say, is this aligned with our strategy or process? How do I actually need to build to drive that efficiency? One of the things that we recommend most of the clients that we work with is something called a business systems council, but it's we talked about like perfect world RevOps versus like, we didn't really get into reality just yet, but like one of the realities is oftentimes admins across different systems, like your CRM, your marketing automation, your sequencing tool, your data enrichment tool, your admins sit in different places, and it's not necessarily all rolled up under RevOps, but more importantly, they don't talk to each other. And what Business Systems Council is a reoccurring meeting where all your admins are in there. They look at all the requests. They do not just say yes to every request. They essentially say, is this aligned with our strategy and process? Okay, this is important. We'll do it. All right, let's put it on the list. This isn't. We're going to push back on this. This is definitely not. We're going to not do this. They create a roadmap for the upcoming sprint, do the work, come back in, say, did we do it? And then they communicate that out, right? And this starts to drive that alignment to that strategy and process, instead of this just being one giant 500, to-do checklist.
And I think where I've seen the Business Systems Council fall apart is if they're not reporting to a leader that sees across all of this and is really pushing people to participate and explaining the why.
Yep.
So if they report into their different departments, they have different bosses pressuring them and yelling at them about certain things that may not align with the overall business. It just falls apart really quickly. The other piece there is, you're absolutely right. The job's so big, we tend to default to ticket taking because we don't have time. One of the major issues I see with trying to align these departments is lack of access to frontline people and lack of knowledge about the systems surrounding you that are both upstream and downstream. And that's something that's really hard to solve because it's a big job and you don't necessarily have time to learn that. How would you advise revenue operations leaders start coaching their team, their system admins, to get that broader lens?
Two things. So again, we've alluded to like ideal state. Let's talk about like what current state is. And this is the first thing that I want to check through, is like, most of the time, most organizations, not this perfect, is this Franken monster that we like to describe it as. And what I mean by that, there may be a RevOps team, but marketing ops is reporting up to the marketing team. Maybe enablement somewhere else. Deal desk doesn't, like, I'm just making stuff up, but it's usually not that perfect world that I described.
No, it's usually rebranded sales operations, or it's marketing and sales ops, or it's sales and CS ops, or, it just depends on who they're reporting to and what the company prioritizes.
Yes, exactly. But this is where, like, if you are a very talented RevOps leader, it doesn't matter how it is structured. And one of the biggest pieces of recommendation I have for anybody is, all right, most of the organization are going to be this Frankie monster. If you're a RevOps leader, you should have a weekly RevOps meeting with all key stakeholders, regardless if they report to you or not, to talk about this alignment. Because like half of this is getting people in a room together to be able like, hey, we're working on this over here. Oh, shoot, I didn't realize that you're working on that. I'm working on this over here, to get everybody aligned. And you want to create a charter for this RevOps team, regardless, again, of how they report. And one of the things as a part of this weekly meeting, and highly recommend if teams are not doing this, is quarterly RevOps planning, where put together a roadmap of all key RevOps initiatives, inclusive of enablement, systems, things like that. Then you go through an LOI, LOE, level of impact, level of effort, high level of impact, low level of effort. Those are things you should do. High level of effort, low level of impact. Those are things you probably shouldn't do, and so on and so forth. You create a roadmap, and then you socialize it across the entire organization. What this does is it allows you to then push back mid-quarter, because when you get the random leader coming in of like, oh my God, this is the most important thing. It's like, okay, Mr. and Mrs. Leader, that sounds incredibly important. This is the roadmap you helped build and agree to, correct? Yeah, okay. Which of these things would you like to reprioritize? And it gives leaders the ability to kind of like have that conversation. It's part of the reason why that systems council is so important as well, because they can do the exact same thing in that systems council to essentially say, oh yeah, that sounds like a hair on fire thing, but by reprioritizing this is going to take away from this leader's priority over there. Do you want, should we set up time together to kind of have that conversation? And then you can start to see this cross-functional alignment. So like thing one is get everybody in a room together, quarterly planning, weekly status updates on how they're doing, regardless if they report to you, and make sure you're communicating that out. Go ahead.
I want to challenge that a little bit, because we've talked about how you've done it, and it's brilliant. You're presenting at every meeting what exactly revenue operations is. You're consistently representing it as the same thing. Those are all great things, but my objection here is we don't have the positional power necessary to always force alignment across the departments.
Yes, this is the second thing it's about to get into.
And if the CEO doesn't agree with you, like I spoke to a couple last week, one of them just plainly said, marketing's not part of the revenue generating team. That's just sales and CS. And I'm like, are you insane? Do you realize they own the P&L and B2C and companies that are PLG? What are you talking about? So let's talk about number 2. Go.
All right. No, this is a perfect tee up, because I could not agree with you more, right? It's like, all right, you painted a bunch of rosy picture stuff, but like, let's actually talk about reality. So one of the questions that get asked the most is like, what is the number one thing you look for in a great RevOps professional, whether it's a leader or somebody else? And the number one thing, hands down, by far and away, I could care less about technical ability, right? Whether you can get into a system, run in and out, like couldn't care less. The ability to lead through influence. And what do I mean by this? Is like, you're going to have and by the way, there's a phenomenal book, if people haven't read it, it's called John Maxwell. It's by John Maxwell. It's called the 360 Leadership, or 360 Leaders, something like this. He talks about it in there. But anyways, it's the ability to lead up, right? Up to people who either your bosses or have greater titles, across individual the same, and down. And what they talk about is everybody can be a leader, and great RevOps professionals have the ability to do this. And to the exact point that you just made, is being able to like change that conversation with the CEO. I was like, oh yeah, that, totally fair, that's how you want to like, set up the marketing organization. Well, let me kind of like ask you some questions. Like, can you help me walk through this? Like, so when we're building out our FY25 budget, and we're trying to say, oh, hey, we need to have this number of salespeople in butts and seats here, but in order to make sure they're successful, we need this amount of pipeline. And in order to have this amount of pipeline, we need to spend money at this point in time. Well, if marketing isn't aligned with sales, you had talked about hiring those individuals ahead of time. And if they show up ahead of time, they're not going to have enough pipe. So, wouldn't it make sense if, whether they report to us or not, like, are you comfortable if, I coordinate with the marketing ops professionals and make sure that they're spending the money in the right period of time, and then we're tracking the efficiency of that money to make sure that we're optimizing that. Oh, okay, you're cool. Like, and so it's like, it's less about, and this is what Maxwell points out in the book, is like, having to lead via title is one of the, and I'm not saying this negatively, but it's one of the lowest forms of leadership, because what you're essentially saying is like, I can't keep people on my side, so I'm depending upon my title. What he's saying is like the holy grail is this, and he's got this pyramid. There's a great summary of the pyramid, but like, if you can lead through influence, is being able to essentially say, oh yeah, I don't care if they report to me or not, but like, I care what's in the best interest of the organization. So why don't I get that marketing individual or the marketing ops individual in my weekly RevOps meeting, even though they don't report into RevOps? We're going to be focused on making sure spend is showing up when it needs to happen, and we're optimizing that spend so that the salespeople that you really care about, Mr. and Mrs. CRO, actually have enough pipeline and so on and so. So being able to tweak those conversations, and those are types of conversations like no executive in their right mind is going to, oh no, that sounds dumb, don't do that. So I think it is harder form of leadership, and you got to be super intentional about like constantly doing that and helping to bring everybody in under the fold.
So I'm smiling and nodding a lot for the people listening to the podcast who can't hear my head rattling. Thank goodness. I recently helped open prize in a 2024 RevOps state of RevOps, and they surveyed a ton of people, and the skills that were important at the very bottom, people in revenue operations either said they do not need or do not think it's important to influence without authority. And I am so glad you completely disagree with that, because I couldn't have set this up better if I had tried. Thank you.
Well, and this is why it's so important that like, I don't care if you're 25 years old and this is your first RevOps job and you're a junior analyst, or like if you're a VP of RevOps and been in it for 15 years, like everybody needs to be able to do this. And if you can master this skill set, like not only will you be able to go super far in your career, but like you're going to have a vastly better impact on your organization in terms of the outcome. Because if you're not doing this, you're just a reactive function waiting for people to tell you what to do. Yep. And whatever things you're doing may or may not be cross-functional and aligned and stuff, all that type of stuff. So like being able to do this is going to help drive that cross-functional nature across the entire team.
And there's two things I advise RevOps people to do, no matter where they are in their career when they started a new company. One is a systems audit, but to particularly focus on the handoff points and how efficient the sales team is at converting leads, and then how bumpy it is, the handover between sales and CS, because that's going to get you exposure to the systems on either side if you're a CRM admin, or in marketing, get you more exposure to how the CRM is structured and how the data works. The other thing I really advise people is, like, I understand the specialization. There's absolutely room for that. We need specialists, but at the same time, if you're a CRM admin or a marketing admin and you don't understand how the data works and how people are pulling reports, what are you doing? What are you doing? You have to know a little bit about that. Or you're going to create a bunch of multi-select pick lists that are garbage when it comes to analysis.
Well, what's interesting about that comment there is we get brought in, Domestique gets brought into, like, I cannot even count how many engagements where a CEO or an executive comes and is like, oh, our data's garbage, or oh my God, I don't trust the data, or we can't make data-driven decisions. It's like, oh, help me, build some reports or dashboards. And we start talking about the data, and like 99 times out of 100 has nothing to do with reporting or dashboarding. 9 times out of 100, it's about the data infrastructure, which the data infrastructure is truly actually a representation of your strategy and your process and then your tooling. And so what I mean by that is things like, oh, hey, do you have stage advancement criteria clearly documented, defined, and rolled out to the team? Is it then codified inside of your CRM? Do you have life cycle?
DocuFind.
Did you see what I did there?
TM.
Yeah, exactly. DocuFind. I'm going to use that moving forward. But life cycle stages, same principle there. What is your enrichment strategy? When people can actually change records in your, not just your CRM, but across your tech stack, how can they change that? So those things are all that strategy and process stuff. And exactly to your point, then being able to, from a system standpoint, to essentially say, oh, the data is the output. Like, here's the thing that people get so wrapped around the axle around the data. Here's a dirty little secret for everybody. Data doesn't matter. The only reason why data matters is if you can make a decision around it. That's all you care about from data. So like, if you're not making a decision around the data, don't look at it. And then if you are making a decision around it, then the question is like, all right, is the data set up in such a way that truly represents our strategy, our process? And then have we built that out in the tech? Exactly to your point of like, we don't have a bunch of multi-select pick list fields. And if you don't have the multi-selects, it's just the dropdown. Are they the right dropdowns? Is actually like, okay, you haven't built a multi-pick on your close loss reasons. What are the actual reasons? Are those the reasons that RevOps and product marketing actually want to go back on a quarterly basis and figure out what's working, what's not? Like, you need to be able to kind of like understand that from the strategy and process. So this is why it's all interconnected.
And we got there a roundabout way with my jumbled question/statement at the beginning, but this comes back to being in touch with the end users and system usability as well, because if you don't understand what the business really needs, it's super easy to have an explosion of validation rules, required fields, and a bunch of other things that don't really matter to the business and probably aren't going to actually be used, but introduce a ton of friction to the end users actually.
I actually genuinely hope that people keep doing that, because like the good news is like they keep bringing people like us in to help unclusterfuck it.
Job security.
Yeah, no, it's great for us. So you want to keep doing that. We at Domestique absolutely love it. But like, if you actually want to kind of do some best in class practices, yes, I 100% agree. One other ethos I personally live by, and I would highly recommend whether you think about just systems or ops in general, simplicity drives execution, right? Like over engineering these types of things tends to enter friction into like, it's not just the systems piece, but processes, all this type of stuff of, meet with the end user, try and figure out like, what is the easiest version of a process? How do you represent that process in the system so that it's this easy to use system, and you will get more out of it in the long run.
Yeah. And if you have somebody on your team who's super technical and just doesn't quite grok the whole requirements gathering thing, pair them with somebody who can sit down with the end users, watch what they're doing, and then go, whoa, and have the like know how to pair people. Specialization is great, but you need to tie it to the overall business objective. So let's move to I'm going to start at feisty, because this is just what I do. It's what I do. I heard last week from a pretty well-known RevOps person that RevOps will always end up reporting into finance, because in publicly traded companies, they have to own the system's finance. I know I've worked in publicly traded companies that didn't do it that way, but reaction.
I fundamentally disagree with it. I fundamentally disagree with it on a number of reasons. So first and foremost, like, where do you want RevOps to report to? Like, if you're truly from an organizational standpoint trying to like optimize that efficiency that we were talking about earlier and have the biggest impact across the customer journey, you want RevOps to have a seat at the table. So in a perfect world, they would have a seat on the E team and be able to be Switzerland. And what do I mean by that? Like, all right, perfect world, they report, they have a seat at the E team, so they're equally represented. And then they can go into meetings and, be able to identify and call out, hey, this is a hotspot here. I'm not throwing this individual or this department under the bus. I'm doing this in the best interest of the organization, and let's figure out how we work together to solve this hotspot. That is the core reason why it's important to be Switzerland. So if RevOps can't have a seat at the table, how do you maintain that kind of like Switzerland ethos, right? Like that neutrality where they can still go in and optimize for that. Yeah, did you want to say something?
Yeah, let's pull on that neutrality thread a little bit more. So I fully agree with you. Let's just be clear on all counts. I feel like revenue operators can get to that neutrality because they have some distance from the actual frontline positions.
Yep.
and they haven't lived, breathed those positions. Like it can be a good thing to be a little bit more unbiased.
Yep.
Where I think this starts to fall apart, and I agree, going up to the CEO is great, and we'll talk about skills gaps and why we can't do that yet. But let's talk about CRO.
Yeah. So this is a great question. So, and this is kind of like, this is like perfect world versus like current state, right? Like we keep talking about this, like, yeah, there's the dream world versus like, let's talk about like what reality is, right? Most RevOps today report into a CRO. If the CRO manages marketing, sales, and CS, it's probably not the end of the world. If like a lot of CROs, it's marketing and sales, I do have some issues. Regardless of what falls under the CRO's purview, one of the things I'm a big believer in is it is on the revenue operations leader to, again, this is the leading through influence piece, to be able to say to that CRO, like, hey, look, my job here, do you agree that my job here is to optimize efficiency across customer journey? Do you agree with that? Saying, okay, yes, it is. All right, because of that, I need to then work across this, and I'm not just going to focus on sales, which is going to be the natural place, particularly if sales all of a sudden starts to get, we see a slowdown here or there. I need to be able to do all this. So one of the things that I need to be able to do is like, I need to understand what's going on with the product team and understanding, hey, if they're supposed to be able to like release something that's kind of a positive impact on the enterprise team, but all of a sudden that release is now getting kicked out of a quarter or two, how does that impact capacity planning? What's that going to do for our ability to forecast the enterprise team the back half of the year from a sales like those types of conversations are equally as important. This is why that RevOps roadmap becomes so fundamentally important, because if you can get the CRO to agree, yes, you need to work across the customer journey, then you can come back to the CRO and essentially say, all right, here's the 30 things. This is the LOE of the 30 things. Here are the 10 things I'm going to focus on. You can see of the 10, if you break it out by department, there's 1 in product, 3 in marketing, 2 in CS, and 4. Like, are you comfortable with where this is at? But the only way this works is if the RevOps leader is being proactive in this, to be able to essentially say, I need to work across the customer journey. And I don't really care if you only manage marketing, sales, or marketing, sales, and CS. My job here is to optimize the customer journey.
I'm going to make some generalizations.
Yes.
And why I don't feel that RevOps should roll into certain positions. CFO, we tend to be highly, highly concerned with data, and it totally makes sense. We also tend to have this belief that everything's a balance sheet.
You're saying CFO, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like 9 times out of 10 when I've seen a report in a CFO, 100% agree with that. And oftentimes you become like revenue accountants or or accounting operations and things like that, of like, now you're starting to get into like collections management and stuff, like important, then make sure that RevOps is aligned with finance, but then you're missing a bunch of those other kind of foundational pieces we talked about, right? Strategy, yep. Process, enablement, so on and so forth.
And there are exceptions. Like there are some people who get how hard the jobs are of salespeople and marketers and want the systems to be able to do what these people need it to do and simplify.
Yep.
But not always the case. The other piece that I just want to touch on is CRO, sales VP, whatever you call these people, their background, they came up through the ranks. They have a ton of empathy, and these different departments need people with extremely different skill sets and motivators. Yep. It's really hard to find somebody who can span all 3 and treat them equally.
I could not agree with you more, which is why that roadmap on a quarterly basis needs to have buy-in from all key go-to-market leaders, not just the CRO.
Yep, totally agree. So let's touch briefly on some skill sets that we need to build in order. So we heard influencing without authority. Absolutely agree. If you can't get people to align around the company objective and sell them on, hey, we're all in this together. We have the same goal. We're trying to do the same thing. Let's unite. If you can't do that, you're in trouble. Yep. Let's talk about some other things that are missing for those of us who want to reach the C-suite.
Yeah, it's a great question. So A couple of things. First and foremost, I think there's an education piece. And the education piece is not just with RevOps professionals, but more so, I think it's actually with companies themselves, i.e., these executives and things like that, about one, what is RevOps? And two, where should it sit and what is the impact it's going to have? The last company I was at, I know you and I have had this conversation, but like last company I was at, I stepped in to lead the RevOps team, didn't know what it was, and then was able to work with some talented mentors and friends and all that type of stuff, and built out the framework that we talked about at the top. And one of the things I would do at the start of every meeting I was in at the company, even the ones with these executives, is show the RevOps framework across customer journey, strategy, process, tools, data enablement. It became a joke after a while, but people started to get it, but they didn't start to get it till almost a year later of like, oh, these 20 things that you were doing back in the day, now this is the impact that we're seeing. And now all of a sudden, people's like the light bulb moment went off. But because RevOps is turning this big slow ship, typically that RevOps or that light bulb moment doesn't happen for several quarters. So first and foremost, educate, like, and it's not just like I would be educating everybody internally, and advocate for yourself of like RevOps needs to have a seat. And part of the reason why this is like we can help, like when RevOps is done well, you can be strategic and see around those corners. This leads into kind of like what are some of the areas that I think are missing, right? We talked about leading through influence. The other thing is like the gravitas to have an executive, like it's really the gravitas to be able to fly at multiple altitudes. And what do I mean by that is most RevOps professionals start out as a data analyst, some 25-year-old, like whip smart, like data, like that's how I started my career, all that good stuff. And it's really easy and it's comfortable to be in the weeds and in the details and flying at 2,000 feet. CEOs, executives, boards, they don't care about the 2,000 feet. They care about the 200,000 foot. Being able to kind of come up to that 200,000 foot level and have a conversation, do in such a way that you understand their perspective, but can then translate that back down to like 2,000 feet. So, what do I mean by that? We used the example earlier about a capacity planner, like annual planning, right? Being able to essentially say, hey, look, oh, by the way, today is the middle of August. I know that we have 6 to 9 month sales cycles. We haven't started our annual planning process for 2025. Hi, Mr. and Mrs. CEO. We need to start this now because if we don't, we're going to be late on pipeline gen. I know the board is going to ask you to grow at 30, 40, 50% next year, which means we're going to need to add a bunch of sales heads. And the problem is if you add sales head midway through the year, given the ramp schedule, by the time they're fully ramped, it's going to be December of next year. But in order to add them and be successful, like that's a conversation the executives and the board cares about. But you can also then translate that down into a complicated, like cross-functional model that then turns into like, hey, how are we kind of holding people against? So that ability to have that kind of 200,000 foot or 2,000 foot conversation and do in such a way where the team respects you regardless of how you're having the conversation, and you understand where people are coming from and what they care about.
Two thoughts here. Feel free to disagree. Every revenue operations team should have some kind of project planning management software where they can keep track of all these things. Because if you're not keeping track of it, I don't care if it's a ticket system, I don't care what you're doing, you're not keeping track of all of it. You can't wrap your head around what should be prioritized at any given time.
Yep.
I'm seeing nodding.
Yeah. And that's the roadmap that I keep bringing up of like, you set up the roadmap and you keep tracking all these net requests. And so you keep coming back to it in your weekly meetings, like, is any net renewal request need to replace or reprioritize our existing roadmap?
And two, I would recommend every RevOps person start exercising the muscle of building a business case. And in order to do that, you need to understand how the project aligns with the top priorities. Yep. And start measuring what kind of possible impact you can make. And I know people are going to, well, you can't say RevOps was the only thing because there's other variables that are changing. I don't care. Just like start with how many hours you're going to save someone by ripping out a bunch of validation rules that are unnecessary. Start there. That's easy.
I I could not agree with you more. Two comments there. One, oftentimes people are like, oh, well, we can't measure that because the data is dirty and we can't look at the store. It's like one of our big tenets about data is not good or bad. It's on a spectrum. And like all you care about is on the spectrum. Like, is it good enough to make a directional decision, right? Like, do we have directionally enough data to make a decision? So like to your point exactly right there is like, all right, maybe we can't run historicals, but how many hours do we save? Like coming up, like, come up with something, and it doesn't have to be like most revenue professionals are like data nerds, myself included. I use nerd affectionately. So like, don't get wrapped around the axle on like, oh my God, it's got to be 96.2%. Like, just like how many hours do we save somebody? Yeah, I love it. Second comment I was going to make, one of the things that I would highly encourage people is don't lose the forest through the trees in terms of like what is revenue ops mission, right? If you think about the mission, right, like I've talked about this with some other people, but revenue operations is unique in the fact that like it's one of the only positions in an organization that can affect both top line and bottom line. And what do I mean by that? Like top line, if you think about it, that's really the sales velocity equation we were talking about earlier. And so like, how are you thinking about the things that you are doing from an efficiency standpoint, right? It's like, oh, is this going to help us from like a conversion rate or increase ASPs, or like, how are we driving more through the funnel at the top line? The bottom line is around like, hey, how are we optimizing our investments, right? Anywhere from like marketing spend, when we add heads, tech spend, like all that type of stuff. But revenue operations can actually impact both of those. So like when I talk about don't lose the forest through the trees, this is where it's like, if you're looking at your to-do list and it's 500 things long and you're just trying to tick it off, like, yeah, updating a certain field may feel good because you ticked off something on your list, but is that really the highest priority thing? And are you driving that efficiency? Like to your point around the business case, right? What is an executive going to care about? Like, oh, hey, yeah, I created that field, or, oh, by the way, yeah, that field's not created, but we updated this process. By updating this process, we're seeing greater stage 2, stage 3 conversion rate, which is having this impact on close one, right? Where like think about the mission, right? Of like, well, how are you driving that efficiently on top line and bottom line?
Yes to all of it. And I think one of my biggest red flags, I promise this all ties together, when hiring a revenue operations leader is somebody who's militantly loyal to a particular technology.
Yes.
Because to your point, every business I look at has the same problems. Leads aren't converting. The salespeople are selling something different than customer success wants to. It has nothing to do with the technology. None.
There is a massive red flag, whether a RevOps person and or a go-to-market leader wants to come in and immediately rip out a piece of tech and add in essentially the same piece of tech, but a different one, or add something net new because they think the tech is going to solve it. Like tech 9 times out of 10 does not solve the issues. It can help if done well, but again, less is more with technology. People keep wanting to add tech. It's like, no. Like less is more, do more with less. Like ripping out HubSpot CRM for Salesforce CRM or vice versa. Like I can guarantee you at the end of the day, it's not going to matter.
You're going to lose so much productivity in the meantime too.
Oh my
Rhys,
God.
thank you so much for this conversation. I think we could probably keep going, but we should probably stop.
Oh yeah. Next time we should do this with just like, well, actually we did with drinks in hand. Like they probably go about 7 hours long, and I don't know if people want that long a form of content. So
no, and I'd probably make it on the news somehow, and my husband wouldn't like that.
Well, I very much enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
Tell us where we can find you to network and Domestique.
Yes, I am terrible, atrocious at social media. So, however, I do have a LinkedIn profile. My first name is spelled uniquely. It's Rhys Williams. It's Welsh. You can thank my parents. So, so Rhys Williams at with Domestique. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can check us out online, domestique.info. One of the things we're big believers in, feel free to reach out to us, not only if you have RevOps needs, but more importantly, we're big believers in paying things forward. If you just want to like a sounding board session around, hey, I'm dealing with this issue. What should I do about it? We're always happy to have kind of sounding board issues. So I'm more than happy to do a 30-minute working session with anybody out there.
And that is why I am so glad you're part of the community. We will include those links in the show notes. And I want to thank everybody for tuning in.
Thank you so much.
For more great content like this, join our community at RevOpsCoop.com and check out the links provided in the show notes.
Keep it RevOps AF, y'all.